The County Council is a legislative body in Howard County that makes the laws for the health, safety, and welfare of the people. Two of the most important actions taken by the Council in terms of growth management, land use, and preservation are putting properties in and taking them out of the PSA. The PSA is the area slated to have water and sewer services. Both of them, except for Marriottsville with only water service for now. It corresponds to the priority funding area, which under state law is only for development in an urban, not a suburban or rural area. Making zoning decisions, that is how land can be used. In terms of the PSA, the County Council can put properties in and take them out as they wish. Here's an example. Where the 1971 general plan called for almost all the county having water and sewer at build-out, the council changed that in 1982 and took thousands of acres out of the PSA, leaving only one-third of the county, the eastern portion, in it. The goal for the western portion was agricultural preservation. The historic urban-rural demarcation line, seen on the 1982 general plan, shows the east to be urban and the west to be rural, running down Centennial Lane to 108 to Clarksville, down Old Guilford Road past the Applied Physics Lab, and back to Route 29. In other words, the County Council can place properties into the PSA and yank them out of the PSA. Council can change zoning requirements until the pilings are out of the ground. Historic developments, 1990. The general plan is changed to include a small extension of the PSA. Although the plan touted preservation in the western part of the county and only a minor modification to the existing water and sewer system, unfortunately, the plan never identified what a minor modification meant. 1991, surrounding communities find out after litigation that the minor modification is for about 600 acres of land from Maple Lawn Farms, and for what is now the developed community of the same name. The zoning was to be changed from one house per 3 acres, rural, to that of a small city, with, according to the DPZ, up to 20 units per acre. In 1992, immediately before the comprehensive zoning, they described the plan for Maple Lawn as being like a Columbia Village center with retail that serves the immediate community, and with a possible theoretical yield of 9,000 dwelling units. In a presentation to the community, they guessed the range would be between 2,000 and 4,000 units. Though internal documents obtained in 1991 called for Maple Lawn to have retail and office space with up to 6,000 employees. At the same time, during the comprehensive zoning process, they tell the Montgomery County Citizens Advisory Council Maple Lawn site has 1/2 acre lots. But now, she said, it was 821 acres of half-acre lots. The reality, the property was still an open farm field, zoned 1 house per 3 acres. The message being, then, regardless of whether they kept the existing zoning or changed it to MXD, we still get somewhere on the order of 1,200, maybe a little bit more, in the way of units. Furthermore, employment would also be allowed, and there would be open space. October 1992, 2 weeks before the comprehensive zoning plan is publicly introduced. The scene, Laurel Regional Planning and Transportation meeting. When asked if there was anything going on with a large mixed-use center in Fulton, Carl Balser, on the DPC staff, answered no plans on that any time in the foreseeable future. 2 weeks later, November, comprehensive rezoning for the east was introduced with proposals for rezoning the Maple Lawn property to a large mixed-use center, which had been described earlier. The Maple Lawn property was now even defined as being in the eastern part of the county, although it's west of Route 29. See how easy it is for the DPZ's minor changes to become major changes to the face of our communities, and with no public input, not a good procedure. And now, with this comprehensive zoning we've identified, a year later, the two properties slated for rezoning from rural to urban land use supposedly has the PSA mysteriously extended to them through the passage of the 2012 general plan.
The PSA has to be removed from these properties. They cannot be rezoned. The 2012 general plan, where the PSA extension supposedly occurred, misidentified properties being placed into the PSA. The general plan, Plan Howard 2030, proposes 3 minor expansions of the planned service area that are never identified. There's no way to know what they are. Ellicott City, Clarksville, and Maple Lawn are possible maybes. Third, it's a major breach of the urban-rural demarcation line that opens up this whole county for congested, high density, and does so for everything between routes 29 and 108 south of 32, right down to the banks of our drinking water supply. By sneaking these PSA extensions through, there is no integrity in the process.
According to zoning language, the CEF zone regulations were written to implement the plan, and thus the unknown extensions of the PSA. CEF zoning can be attached essentially at will, based on the developer's request, and allows apartments up to and including congestion. Plus, CEF allows offices and the highest intensity commercial uses. You're looking at part of the specification for the CEF zoning category. Being involved in the zoning issues around the Hodenout property in Clarksville, many letters and emails were sent and phone calls made to the DPZ. Input from that department was not forthcoming. In fact, residents received either wrong answers or no answers. It seemed as if the county government had their own spot application policy of obscuring or manipulating to cover up matters that should be under public, and that means citizens' control.
All the facts are against it. The Big Land parcel is upstream of my house. I live here on Murphy Road here in Fulton, and those rainproof surfaces upstream will create a huge runoff through my stream into the nearby Rocky Gorge Reservoir, which supplies drinking water for over 3.5 million people. This is not smart growth. This parcel does not have to be rezoned. If we care about our environment and the bay, we'll begin by taking parcel 113 out of the PSA.
Take these 2 parcels out of the PSA. It's horrible for the bay, and it's a hazard to the drinking water supply for the counties in the region and downstream.
If you say high-density development is good with its high amount of impervious surfaces, it's not. That's a myth. Any zoning that allows it will open the floodgates. We're facing something that would be vastly worse, more damaging than a few large lot houses on these properties. The smart option, and in fact it's a wonderful idea, is a preservation overlay over the Patuxent Reservoir watershed. It would be permanent over the watershed boundary. You have to respect the entirety of the entire watershed. You can't increase those impervious surfaces in Clarksville and Fulton time and time again. If you want to put it in terms of pavement, congestion, hard surface runoff, go ahead and explain that to the Chesapeake Bay. It would be a very high price to pay.
People all around the area are weighing in on taking these properties out of the PSA, not continuing this sprawl across the permanent rural area. The runoff from a Hodenout property in Clarksville, with many planned impervious surfaces from high-density zoning, will affect the Middle Patuxent. And the runoff from the Yeager parcel's many impervious surfaces, the high-density RA15 proposed zoning, will hurt the Patuxent Reservoir watershed.
Now, Howard County's current plan is especially dangerous because it is the first precedent of bringing water and sewer and accompanying high-density residential development into this entire drainage area west of Route 29, which until recently Howard County officials had insisted would remain low density to protect this reservoir. Because of this, many members of the General Assembly whose constituents drink this water had earlier sponsored legislation that would have mandated low density development within the reservoir's watershed. Unfortunately, it was not enacted. With absolutely no restrictions on the amount of impervious surface that can be put there, thanks to the CEF zoning just enacted by Howard County's council. Now, this is not smart growth. This is dumb growth.
The more impervious surface we have is the downfall. I mean, we're getting inundated with impervious surfaces, and there's no place for the water to go except into the river or into the receiving waters. And Howard County plays a big part in the deterioration of that river. We need to think out of the box. We need to find a better way to handle human waste than to have it run into the Patuxent River. We're beginning to make some big strides in that, and we need to keep that old engine going full blast, because storm weather is a very big part of what's causing the the failure of our water quality right now. We've got to be strong, and we've got to be absolute uncompromising when they build, that they don't do things that will make that receiving water worse than it was when they got there.
Here's the natural gas pipeline, a natural causeway for sewer and water lines. That's the PSA. All the land it runs through looks like undeveloped land to us. Is something afoot? Take the two parcels, Hoddenot in Clarksville and Yeager in Fulton, out of the PSA. They weren't put in there legitimately, and even if they were, you can do it. You're the legislative body in Howard County. Don't open the floodgates of PSA extension and rezonings. Let's consider another option for the Yeager parcel and others near the watershed along the Howard County border, a preservation overlay of the Patuxent Reservoir watershed. That still preserves our open land in the western county, as has also been the standard historically, by keeping the urban-rural demarcation line, and protects our neighbors' drinking water and ultimately the bay. Let's start doing that now, and not have future Marylanders pay for even more pollution that leads to further destruction of waters flowing into the bay and the bay itself. Let's prevent further pollution to these areas and their water, and make Howard County a responsible partner in protecting the drinking water supply and the bay.